Okay, Andre, you're up.
Thanks, Victor. So I have spoken to a couple of you, so you might know this already, but we are following through with a plan for growth for 2019. And with that, that means that we're going to have a new front-end engineering manager taking care of plan. So most of you know this already, but I wanted to give this proper introduction that Donald is the new front-end engineering manager. He's joined a couple of weeks ago and he's now onboarding, and I'm making sure that we hand over every topic, and the handover should be complete around 2 to 3 weeks from now. And the point of this introduction, so that from now on, every topic that involves front end of plan should involve Donald as well. I will still be here for the next couple of weeks, actively just handing over and making sure that nothing falls through the cracks. But very shortly, Donald will be just fully responsible for everything that touches front end on plan. And yeah, with that, Donald, I don't know if you want to say a few words to the team.
No, not really. Thanks, Andre. So I've met a good chunk of you, but not a lot of not everyone, obviously. So I'm Donald. Nice to formally meet everyone. I've been lurking kind of in the last plan, so you're probably wondering who I am, what I'm doing. So thanks for the intro. Yeah, I don't really have much else. Like Andre said, we'll do the transition over the next couple of weeks. But anything that's involving any of the stuff that he would typically do, I'll ask is that you include me in them from now on, and then we'll figure out who should handle it as they come up, as things come up.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Thanks, Donald. So we'll move over to the next point. Sean.
Yeah, this came out of the retro for 11.7, I think, where we were talking about issues to work on. So, like, why is that? So, there are basically two ways we could look at this, because the HackerOne program became public in December. And before that, I think it was still ramping up, being invited. Different people were being invited to it. But either potentially we are both, but to a different mix, introducing new security issues that we then need to go back and fix. So we release a feature that includes a security issue, we have to go back and fix that. Or we are fixing security issues that were already there that either weren't reported or weren't prioritized previously. So in that issue, I took a look at the last 6 milestones we've worked on from 11.4 through to the current one. So obviously the caveat is that if we have introduced security issues recently, they might not be reported yet. And another caveat is that because we've been doing so many security issues in recent releases, we haven't been doing as many features. So we've had fewer chances to introduce security issues because of that. But in general, it looks pretty good. One of them had version 2 point something. Some of them are just literally like, since we introduced this feature, which has been in GitLab basically forever, it's had this issue, which just, either wasn't reported or wasn't prioritized before. But the ones from the 11.x series, we haven't had any of those reported and scheduled in the last 3 months. And the majority are from pre-GitLab 9.0, which was like 2 years ago. So that's pretty promising. Basically, we can assume that most of the stuff on the right of that table is done. We won't have the same volume on the right-hand side of that table in the next 6 months. So it's more about the third column from the left, and there, what we have to do there. So yeah, seems pretty good. Comment in the issue if you've got any feelings on that. Otherwise, I'm just going to close it tomorrow, I think, because we don't really need to do anything with it, which is good news. Ramya, over to you.
Thanks, Sean.
So I just wanted to give a heads up about the changes that are coming up in the quality team. So there's a new person who's joining us this coming Monday. His name is Valmer, and he's from Netherlands. And he'll be working closely with the plant team. He'll be dedicatedly working with the plant team. And I think some of you might have known, like I'm actually transitioning into the QA manager role for the dev sub department, and I'm in the interim phase right now. So just wanted to give a heads up about the changes that might come in, like with Valma coming in and stuff like that. Yeah. Victor, over to you.
Thanks, Ramya. So in your, to clarify, in your role, yeah, okay, so you wrote it down. So manager for the entire dev sub-department. So that includes create and manage. You'll be responsible, right? Awesome, thank you. And then, so Walmart will be essentially replacing what you've been doing up to now.
Right.
Okay, awesome. Thanks for letting us know. So I wanted to give update on what we're doing or prioritizing, and also just get everybody excited and thinking about one of these designs, because I think it's pretty difficult, and I already pinged Annabelle in chat earlier this week. And so basically, if you look at our roadmap, which I'll link, what it is. So if you go to gitlab.org and you click on, if you click on gitlab.org and you look at a roadmap, which I know Kushal has been frantically fixing over the past couple of weeks, so thank you, Kushal. It looks pretty awesome now, in my opinion. And I think my opinion was worth something, because I look at this like every day. So to me, this looks pretty amazing right now. And I wanted to mention, sorry, this Zoom thing is driving me nuts here. So we have a lot of things that we're working on in the plan area. But if you squint your eyes, and probably have to organize this a little bit better, or maybe we need some more features, you'll see that most of these things, at least for the next couple of months, are not new things, in the sense that it's continuing to be making incremental improvements on what we already have, but we're not inventing any new, say, object or really feature functionality. I would say this one is a pretty big new thing, manual ordering of issue lists. But that's, again, it's not new UI fundamentally. We're not inventing any new abstraction, right? The same with this one. There's boards. It's iterating on boards. It's iterating on discussions. It's iterating on portfolio management and issue management, so on and so forth. So and then search is going to create. But so the really big two new things that are coming down as we hit like second quarter 2019 or calendar years is really custom fields, which is key value labels, and value stream mapping. So these are the really two big things. So
sorry, did you say custom fields? I thought we said we weren't going to do custom fields as key value labels, but I might have got confused there.
Yeah, so that's really confusing. So maybe I should just use the word key value labels instead of just custom fields. So I'm going to just delete that instead of. So custom fields as a topic is something, or as a problem, is something that customers really want. And so everybody sort of knows inherently what custom fields is. But our first stab, at least for now, the plan, and there's still actually, I think, some debate here, is that we're going to design key value labels, and we're going to use labels to achieve custom or solve part of the problems that custom fields claims to solve. So key value labels essentially is just having labels and formalizing the word DevOps :plan to become a first-class citizen logic inside GitLab, so that if you have DevOps plan, then you cannot have DevOps create or DevOps manage, for example. And so that's at least the initial concept of how we're going to address the problem of custom fields. So what we thought a lot about is, should we do this or value stream mapping first? And I've been really emphasizing that we shouldn't do both, because these are both pretty big changes to GitLab, and I don't want too many things going on, big changes, especially because while we're doing all these things, we still have to move forward with portfolio management. That's still pretty much our number one priority, but you know, there's other priorities as well. But as we're chugging along with portfolio management, improving epics and the roadmap view and the child epics views and the tree structure, tree views, what else can we do? And so in the past half year, we've always put custom fields first because it seems like a quick win, something we can get out of the way. But really, value stream management, especially at the product level, has become its own product category, first of all. And secondly, as I mentioned last time, and secondly, we said that as a goal, as an OKR, we need to make strides toward, I forgot exactly what it is, so I'll link to it later if I can find it. But essentially, we need to move forward in that particular product category, whereas say custom fields belongs to project management, which is an existing category. So from like a breadth perspective, we need to make we need to move in value stream management. Right now we keep saying value stream management. We've been talking about the concept of value stream management for over a year, but we've essentially have 0 things to show for it in terms of new things. I mean, we participated in a Forrester report on value stream management, but after that, we essentially haven't added any new functionality in this area, and we have a vision for value stream management. And in a nutshell, value stream management is telling you to have custom workflows and showing you what the end-to-end cycle time within that custom workflow is, and so on and so forth. And so I don't want to get into detail of VSM today, but I did want to talk about how custom workflows is essentially the first MVC to value stream management, or at least that's how we're organizing it from like a project management perspective, from a OKR perspective. We're saying to do VSM, what is the very first step to get there, or what's the MVC of it? And the MVC is just having custom workflows to start. And when I say custom workflows, most of you probably already know if you've used Jira, right? You can, I think they call them like issue state transitions or transition schemes or whatever. And then you can apply them to like projects, and you can say that this issue goes from in dev to in code review, in UAT, in production, stuff like that. You can configure those stages as you want. And so we've never had that in GitLab. We've been trying to shy ourselves from that because we think that's too much configuration. But that's clearly something that customers want. And it's also necessary, I argue, for VSM because we need those custom stages in order to articulate a feature like something like this, like Annabelle created a while back, like I think like half a year now almost, to say that, you have these, say 8 stages in your organization and you want to customize them and you want to articulate what is the end-to-end cycle time for that. So right now in GitLab, we have psychoanalytics, but that's just not enough for customers because we can't assume that they're already using issues and merge requests, or even if they are, and they're using everything in GitLab, they have the end-to-end cycle time, but do they really care about how much time you spend in issues versus merge requests versus say pipelines, or do they care about more specifically the stages that they customize and care about? So that's the name of the game for value stream management, and to support that we need this custom workflow state. So let me stop there to take questions, comments on that, if there's any. If not, then I wanted to talk about, so that's why I swapped the priority of custom fields and custom workflows. So custom workflows is next essentially, and it's actually scheduled for 11:10. Realistically, I don't expect us to be writing any code in 11:10, but how we've been working very well and planned, at least in my perspective, and engineering managers can feedback, and especially if you're tracking certain metrics. But the fact that we are starting to, like, if we have an issue scoped and designers are talking about it, and engineers are talking about it and collaborating and thinking about it and writing down words and pictures, I think that's a success for that milestone. So that's the caveat of putting in 11:10. And so this is the initial concept of having some states that you can configure, and you can go through them, and then it can go to eventually the state goes to close. So the initial concept here is that we're going to have some state transition scheme, right? So workflow state. But what I don't want to do is break everything in GitLab automatically, right? So if you, right now in GitLab, there's two states, there's open and close, right? So if you, the moment you introduce additional ones, you're going to break everything in GitLab, like, you know, just showing the word open here, right? Or, you know, having closed issues or merge requests that close issues. So what's a way to not break everything with one feature release? And I'm, you know, open to more ideas, but I think this is a good way to do it, which is the way we do it is that the workflow states, they're not on the level of open versus closed. States are there's only ever going to be two issue states, open and closed, and workflow states or workflow stages, whatever we call them, are going to be quote unquote like sub states or sub whatever of, sorry, I have to take this call. You guys can keep looking at it.
I'm just going to call Victor out for having like 265 unread texts because that's way too many. And I couldn't cope if that was me in that situation.
You should see my unread count on Gmail.
Yeah.
I don't think I want to.
59,000.
Damn, you're double mine.
I won. It's mailing lists from W3C and stuff that I only check the ones that are worthy.
Okay, so I have 0 unread emails in my GitLab inbox, 0 emails in my GitLab inbox, sorry, and 1 in my personal inbox. So obviously we're coming at this from very different ends of that.
Yeah, I'm the same as you, Sean.
Please,
too.
Sean, please do not make an update to the handbook about how we should maintain inbox 0.
No.
I'm with John.
Well, clearly, Andre would need to spend like several months, if not years, on that. Yeah.
I'll just mark all as read. Done.
Right. Yeah.
That's called email. That's called what? Email, not foreclosure, but bankruptcy. I've declared that multiple times.
Hey, Victor, you're back.
My email credit score is very bad.
Seems like folks are talking about something more interesting, so I'll let you finish.
No, we're picking on you. We noticed Sean noticed how many unreads you had. We started talking about that.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So thanks for holding, folks. It was just my son's daycare calling, so nothing serious. So that's why I can keep talking. So that's what I'm showing here, and I think that's a good design. Again, if you have better ideas right now, please just shout or comment an issue later if you have better ideas.
So
go ahead, Sean.
Sorry, this is not directly related, but one relevant sort of concept from Jira is that you have an issue status and you have an issue resolution. But resolutions only apply to closed statuses. This is kind of the opposite of that, where like workflow states only apply to open statuses. And then I guess we could add resolutions in future, like say closed duplicate, closed move, closed resolved, closed, won't fix, whatever.
Yeah, I agree. Like structurally, it's similar, but semantically, I guess it's different. Like resolution is, I think.
Yeah, we're tackling the other side of that. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're like tagging, and you're annotating why something was closed, whereas this is, I think of this as truly as part of like a network diagram or a state transition diagram.
It's almost, Victor, as if an issue could either be open or closed. That's given. But for an issue to go from open to closed, there are a set of stages that a group or a project wants to impose for a given kind of issue, frankly. So you might have one kind of issue that you expect it to go through A, B, C, D, and another kind of issue that might go through 1, 2, 3 to get to closed. And what you're doing is you're establishing a way in which a set of stages or steps that you expect an issue to transverse as it goes from open to closed.
Exactly. And that's actually super relevant, John, as I'm going to highlight a couple of problems and what I think are good solutions are probably better ones related to exactly that, the multiple schemes, as you mentioned. I use the word scheme and transition scheme because that's what Jira calls them. I think when I used it like 5 years ago, and they're uber confusing, right? Because there's like all this level of indirection. But to wrap up at least this point, I wanted to again emphasize, like John said, there's only ever going to be 2 issue states, and I think that's crucial. For example, like I want this to be at the GitLab Ultimate tier, and so if you're using GitLab any tier lower, then you're not going to have these states, and you're going to be used to open and close. And the moment you go to a GitLab Ultimate, like how are your issues going to behave? Like what is the migration going to be? Like is everything going to be screwed up? So I think this is a relatively safe way to do it because it's additional in the sense like the information architecture is additional, and it doesn't replace anything. So I think this is a pretty safe route to go about it. But again, please, give us better ideas. And again, the problem to be solved is just having workflow states, but really the strategic thing to support is VSM. So always keep your eyes on the prize with VSM. And we'll talk about that in a second. I see 2 problems, and one is very VSM specific to address. And then the other point is that when customers have been asking for this, again, they're not going to suggest this specific detail, right? Because, they're not thinking in like a product perspective that we are in, we don't expect them to be. They're just users of the software. And so in particular, the feedback we get specifically is when they're using issue boards to do workflows. So this is great in the sense that GitLab users are already wanting this feature and have demonstrated by using GitLab they want this feature, because we're giving them GitLab issue boards to use this feature with labels, and they're really struggling. It's a pain. So how come sometimes when I transition issue on the board, it works fine, but when there's no way to transition an issue between states on an issue itself. You're asking me to remove a label and add a label. That's really silly, and people are asking for like, oh, if you're adding a board label, then treat it differently. And so you can see how that's really, really messy design. It's really crazy. And one of the reasons I do not think that this should be built on top of labels because of all that messiness, and this should be a new first-class citizen native object. So keep in mind as you read through these and offer designs, those are the underlying problems. Those are the existing feedback we have with customers saying that they're already using this. They love the concept with the board, but it just doesn't work good enough right now. And then also another point is that once we have this workflow, then we can create a board, whether it's at the project or group level, and I'll get to how that's relevant in a second. And you can create a specific type of board that doesn't use label list, assignee list, or milestone list anymore. It uses workflow state lists. And then you can say, yep, I want this scheme, and then I'm done, and then the board is there right away, and then there's no confusion, right? So that's yet another win for how this will be super useful. I'm going to keep going. Please interrupt.
Quick question. Do you imagine that these stages, workflow stages, would be applied if someone's doing Kanban? Would they build a Kanban board with these as workflow stages? Do you imagine that? Or do you think they would continue to use labels as a way to define that? I mean,
are you saying Kanban in the sense like there's like only 2 states, that type of Kanban, or what do you mean by like Kanban?
I mean Kanban as in, if I define a Kanban board to track, a Kanban board effectively tracks the flow of work from stage to stage, or from resource to resource. So there's multiple stages.
Yes, I would definitely. I mean, when you're saying Kanban, do you mean like it goes from ready to development to review, and then there's an assumption that, okay, if it's in the development stage, it's going to be associated with the engineering. If it's in review or testing, it's going to be associated with I think I'm answering my own question as I ask it and talk about it. I think that's exactly what this would drive, wouldn't it? It would, because it has the problem with labels that we've observed in customer feedback. It's just too crazy, right? It's just too flexible, and we're building the building blocks. That sounds dumb. We're setting up the building blocks so that we can have features on top of this. And so if we have the concept of stages, which I think is a pretty atomic unit of these workflow processes, we can build so many things on top. We can build width limits that you pinged me on earlier. We can do the auto, roles and team members associated with stages. We can do VSM, which is very strategic. So to me,
Right.
just having workflow stages as a native citizen in GitLab is crucial to unlock all these things, because again, labels, we've exhausted them
We've
already.
overloaded them. We've overloaded labels to do
Way
so
too
many
much,
different
yeah.
things.
And so we can't do it anymore. And so there's two major problems. I mean, for example, like the problems that John just brought up, or like opportunities, there's just way more there. But just focusing on VSM, there's two. Well, actually, VSM, there's one specifically. But with just implementing this feature, and to avoid just craziness, I see one huge problem. So again, when you look at Jira and you configure things like projects, and you'll have these things called transition schemes. So you'll define, like John said, you can transition states, you can define states ABC, and then you can say like my transition scheme is going to be A goes to B goes to C, or it can be A goes to C goes to B, or it can be B goes to A goes to C. And you can have like a bazillion transition schemes, and you can have arrows pointing every way, and that defines what are allowable transitions between any given state. And then you can probably have cycles, and probably Jira will allow you to do that fine. But what Jira will say is that per project, again, this is like, I haven't looked at this in detail recently, but from what I've seen in the past, per project, you have to choose one specific transition scheme. And to me, that makes sense, right? That's a good design, but it's really messy. Sorry, again, I have to take this call. So please continue talking about what you were talking about.
I actually have a question for Sean. I remember previously we worked on something, or at least we planned on working for something regarding tracking label changes or something to kind of do this tracking for value stream management. Did we ever ended up doing that? And the question that I actually have is, will this be done on these stages as well so that we can track them?
So yes, we did. Jan did this for labels, but then we decided not to use labels for it. So like we have the available, but we don't use it. I imagine we will do the same tracking, because the whole reason we added the tracking to labels was so that we could do the VSM part of this, but I don't actually know
what's planned.
Yeah, I haven't looked into the details, but I'm pretty sure that we will be tracking it.
Sure. The other comment I would have is that so part of me is already thinking, what's the limit? UI wise, how are we going to put like 10 stages? Because people will make mistakes and they will go overboard. But that's a problem for designer, for Annabelle, I guess. And the other is, I'm expecting not to have very strict rules of what stages can transition to which stages. If I want to go from ready to closed, I should be able to. So I'm not expecting to have strict rules, Victor, to go from one stage to another stage. This will be very free, right?
Yeah, there's a discussion somewhere, I forget where, but we don't want to make this enforced yet. And it's actually in our handbook somewhere that says like no enforced workflows as like a product principle. So we technically would need to change that if we want to even make this enforced. But going back to, there's only two states, open and closed, right? So this should not break a merge request closing an issue. So if you're in one of those earlier states and you have a merge request that closes the issue, then you skip the stages, right? And then like we don't want to enforce that, because we would have to solve that problem as a first release. Instead, I think that the approach would be, we have this great state flow diagram. You can use it in a board and you can click the button. So for example, we could enforce it technically in the UI by saying that when you click the button, the thing you can transition to, it will only give you the one that makes sense. Like to me, that's a design detail. But like,
yeah, I agree.
To break like the merge request closing issue aspect.
Yeah.
Or
then you can
later
have.
On,
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
No, I was just saying, like, if you have an issue board later, like, can you drag to multiple stages, like a future stage later? Again, that's a design detail, but I don't think we need to restrict it right now a priori.
But to be clear, Victor, I expect that enterprise say, I want to have the security team review everything. So I want to have a stage in my, issue approval or my use case approval process that this team reviews it.
There's a clear use case for it. Yeah, John, I don't.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I want to make sure that's at least
exactly. There's a clear use case for it, but it's one of those. It's great because we don't have to decide now, or like the decision we make now will not prevent us from providing those constraints. Whereas the reverse will. Like if we do a constraint now, then we can't do the reverse, right? So I think that's why it is a safe approach. So again, apologies for the interruption. So for this particular, so as I was talking about, there's all those schemes and it gets really crazy. But I think what's crucial is if you're looking at one issue, you should have some, because we keep thinking about it, or at least when I kept thinking about it, maybe you don't, I kept thinking about it from an issue board perspective, or you're looking at multiple issues and you just drag them through the stages. But if you're like a single developer or an engineer, which many of you here are, and you're looking at a single issue, you want to be able to move that issue from one stage to another stage. And so there should be be very little confusion whether you're looking at issue A and issue B, that it has the same state transitions, right? So say you're a member of the plan team, a plan group, and you're working on one issue today, and you're working on another issue tomorrow, and they're both planned features. It would seem pretty ridiculous in my mind that how come, today they're called like in UAT and whatever, and tomorrow it's called like in business testing, like the names of the states totally change. I think that would be crazy, right? So that to me brought up the fact that given a certain project, you have all the issues in the project, they probably should all share the same state, workflow state scheme, right? You shouldn't have one particular issue having a different scheme and another issue having a different scheme, because that would just be confusing, especially to say an engineer or a designer who's working on multiple issues, even maybe in the same board. So, but at the same time, another problem is that you want to offer flexibility so that one team wants to do it one way or another team wants to do it another way. And then yet another point is that maybe you want to view this at an executive level and you want some type of standardization. So even though those two teams have independence, and they should have, but maybe in your particular organization or in that particular part of the organization, say the director says that I want all my 5 teams to have the same state so I can see an executive or director type view. And so that's what I'm trying to comment on in this particular paragraph here, and have a particular suggestion here. First of all, is that I think we should not do this at the project level, at least as a first iteration, because the customers that are asking for this in the first place, I apologize, hopefully this is the last time. Hello?
By the way, while Victor is there, I'm already thinking that UI-wise, this should be updated on the issue boards as well, because even though like you'll still have assignee lists and all the kinds of things, the information should be updated there as well, for the issue boards card.
I agree. And the thing about this capability, while it's focused on value stream management, this will bring us so much closer to parity and to a place in the market where competing head to head with these other planning and management tools, I think this is going to be a huge plus for us in the market.
Yeah, while you said that, John, this might have to do with my multiple part here and multiple personality, but I'm kind of seeing this applicable to merge requests as well. I'm wondering if when we build this for issues, there is some way that we can then use that in some way to have it consistent with merge requests. Does anyone have any thoughts of that?
The approvals thing has to be harmonized, right? Like that has to come together. I think it makes sense for merge requests, but we're solving part of this problem, which is, control and governance and some structure with approvals. And then there's a lot of thought with approvals.
Sure.
However that's done, I think it needs to come together there. So I think it makes sense with merge requests, definitely.
I think the merge requests workflow is so much simpler than a issues workflow, because like you don't have that many stages in a merge request. You like develop it and then you put it in review or testing, and that's pretty much. I mean, maybe there is some space for creativity, but I don't think for the merge request it's that much complicated of a workflow as it can be for issues.
Yeah, I was thinking more of the security merge requests, but that's probably because they're too complex at this point. But we can definitely, there's a stage when they're closed, they're not closed, the merge requests, but they are ready to be merged. Although we do have approvals for it, that might be better for that particular case. But anyway, I just wanted to put that thought out there.
Right. No, that's great, Andre. So hopefully I won't have any more interruptions. I shouldn't. So just cutting to the chase here. So what I'm suggesting is do it at the group level, because customers are asking for this at the group level. You know, enterprise customers who need these workflows are typically doing things at groups with multiple projects in the groups, with issues from multiple projects in the group. And then what I'm proposing is in the future, so as a first release, we do it at the group. So for when you define it at a group, and actually, this is where I'll need your help from an engineering perspective, folks, is I think we might need to build this all at once. But my thinking is that if you define it at, say, group, say you have this structure, right? Group A, B, C. And if you define it at group C, then it's well defined so that project P and project Q and project R all use the state transitions of group C because that's well defined. That's its immediate parent group. But the moment you have also group A has its own state transitions and group B has its own state transitions and group C has its own transitions, what I argue is that it should just be an overloading sort of mechanism. So the most immediate ancestor, that workflow state, you use that. And if your most immediate ancestor doesn't have a workflow state, then you use the one of your next ancestor going up and so on and so forth. So with that structure, you're able to have some high-level organization. So if like your director is at group A, you can just say to your team members like group B and group C don't have workflow states, and we'll define it at group A. And so all your downstream groups and projects will use that workflow state, and everything will be well defined. So this is my take on how to do it. I still think it's actually pretty confusing. I think it maybe can be saved with some clever UI, but I still think this is actually pretty confusing, but I can't think of anything better. So happy to entertain better ideas if you have any just off the top of your head right now. So if there isn't two salient consequences, given a project P, all issues in P will have the same workflow states, and that's always true, provided we never do workflow states at the or even if we do, yeah. So this will always be true, which is good. So at least when you're working in the same project, you'll never have craziness like, oh, like why is it's the same project? Why is it different? But given group G, different issues in G may have different workflow states, which because there might be different issues at different layers and they might have different immediate parents. So this might be really messy if you're looking at a workflow issue board in G and some issues do not appear by definition because they don't fall into the right particular workflow state. So like, how do you present that from a UI perspective? Will that be confusing that you're looking at a group issue board and you're looking for an issue that should be in the scope under that group, but it doesn't appear in that board because of this thing? That is like a problem, I think. I don't think it's a deal breaker, but it's something that, again, that's why I wanted to bring up this meeting. If something jumps out to you like a good way to solve it, please comment. But to me, this is a messy one. So either you're all bored or it's just too difficult and you have nothing to offer right now. But
yeah, so
think about it.
Victor, I think just looking at, I think the way Jira handles it is, as you said, it just doesn't show up on the board if it's not in a
okay.
that's defined in the board. I don't know if that's the right way or if that's just the kind of the standard.
Okay.
But yeah, just
Okay.
But Victor, it could be as simple that when it goes from one state or stage, I don't know, and maybe you might want to think about the use of the word state. Because
yes, there's a big discussion there. Yep.
But when it goes from one to another, you could simply have an automation that assigns a label to it when it goes from one to another, which would keep the older boards still working. So you could have a board that illustrates where things are at based upon what label was attached to it, but
Right.
it still could be in state A or B or C, right?
Right. So the only thing I was worried about, John, is that this might be maybe just an edge case that really doesn't matter. But say you have group A, B, C, and project P here, and so issue X would appear in group A's issue board if all these intervening groups don't have workflow states, as I mentioned, but group A does. But say you have another project called project Q that is in a group called like group D or something. That is a subgroup of group B. I know it's hard to visualize, but essentially there's another project, right? And so in that particular case, that issue in that other project follows a different scheme of workflow states, and therefore it would not show up in group A's board. And so I'm just commenting that that's confusing because, and maybe that's just like an edge case that we deal with, like that shouldn't happen. Like, you know, so a director at GitLab says like, I want to see all my issues, and why is like team, you know, why Sean's team's issues not in my board? And Sean's answer is, oh, we started using our own workflow states. Sorry, like we'll get it fixed. Like maybe that's the answer to that problem, or maybe it's like just a specific list of like issues that do not fall into these stages or something like that. So it can be solved, but to me that's just something that's not elegant that I noticed, and so I wanted to call it out.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point to call out. I think eventually in the UI, so I never like when things don't appear silently. So,
Exactly,
but I'd be okay.
exactly.
I'd be okay in having some sort of warning, like if we see that the scope of the issue, the workflow issue board, affects issues from projects that are not in the same workflow state scheme, whatever.
Right.
We could just say a warning that X amount of projects are ignored, or some issues might be ignored, and then having a popover just explaining why.
Yeah.
At least initially to clarify that thing, but I think we can solve that on the UI level.
Okay. So it's not like a fundamental deal breaker.
Yeah.
But something to be addressed. Good point. Thanks, Andre. So finally getting to actually value stream management. This is related to something John wrote, and I can't find it. I saw yesterday, John, your comments on lead time versus cycle time. But the goal of value stream management is to actually measure these times, right? So like, how do we do that in GitLab? So if you like, we have all these states, it's easy to measure time, right? So we actually have to do it. So the easy part is in one of these intermediate stages, right? So if you're an issue and then you go into review and then it leaves review, you can just record this timestamp. So boom, that's pretty easy to measure that time. We can store in the database, blah, blah, blah. There's gonna be weird edge cases where you sometimes skip it. But we can probably, come up with a list of, rules and algorithms to address that. So I'm not worried from the perspective of like, say, considering the intermediate states, but defining where your cycle time starts and ends, that's, I think, is a problem that needs to be addressed. And so let me start at sort of the top. And why don't, John, you sort of motivate the problem of lead time and cycle time and why that matters and so forth.
So these concepts date back to lean manufacturing, the idea of flow and managing flow of work through an assembly line. And this is where Kanban and the idea of, I was using your visual, but it's cool, Victor. But the idea then is that understanding cycle time tells me how long it takes a widget to go through my factory. So when I get an order, or we get an order for something, I mean, we could use this team as an example. When Victor says, let's build, the custom workflows, the cycle time is going to tell us how long it takes the team to engineer and deliver that from start to finish. And that means Victor would know that if it takes 30 days or 60 days, it means that from the time Victor knows he has something he needs to deliver for a customer, it's a 60-day cycle. And that's often translated into lead time, which is how far in advance it's going to impact a customer. So if, in one view, it's from a customer saying, I want a new feature, to while it sits in the backlog and it gets churned. That's one definition of measuring the time. And that's not cycle time. That's lead time. So it says it's going to go into here and it's going to come out here. So that's another measurement that people are focusing on. And a lot of times focusing on lead time is what the people in the industry are focusing on, because that's what the customer sees. But a key thing that drives it is cycle time, which is the process into the middle of it. So these are key. And as people and our customers are trying to figure out how to go faster, having insight into this is going to be one of the things that drives them to improve. Now, it plays into the comment I made yesterday about WIP and WIP limits of, a lot of times people who are practicing Kanban will say, I have a WIP limit of no more than 3 things at one time, and therefore I will not pile things on top of someone and increase the amount of work in progress they have. And that forces people to focus on flow, and it actually makes things go faster. So that's something we're going to have to think about as we implement, because I know people are going to look to do this. And I was at an Agile conference yesterday, and it kept coming up, and which sort of sparked me pinging Victor on an issue where it was outstanding. We need to probably think about it.
Thanks, John. So thanks, John, for articulating those 2 specifics, right? So to me, like as John said, lead time is more relevant from just like a feature perspective of like why we think this is critical to help customers, why customers have told us this is important, why the industry thinks this is important. Because to me, the cycle time plus lead time, or if you classify lead time as a whole thing, just the whole thing from when customer cares or gives you feedback about something and them getting business value, that end-to-end time is directly correlated to your business doing better. It's directly correlated with customer benefit, right? So, and as I tried to articulate last time, and these videos that I've been putting together, that is actually the best way I can think of to build a tool or do a comparative analysis. Like if you want to compare your company versus another company in the same industry, how else would you compare? Like you can't compare, like I added a button, like your button versus my button has different benefits to my respective customers. You almost cannot compare them. And then now you're comparing buttons in different industries. It's like ridiculous, right? So like to do any type of objective comparative analysis, or to do any just doing it, measuring this for the purpose of improving it, again, you just need some metric. And to me, time is like the best metric because it's so objective and can, like, you cannot bias it really. And so that's why end-to-end lead time is important. The problem with end-to-end lead time is it's also ill-defined, right? So like, and I'll get to in a second why that's ill-defined. So that's why the cycle time specifically is better defined. And if it's better defined, it's actually easier to build a tool, build a product. Like if we're GitLab, everything that we've been saying, that John and I've been saying is true. But when it comes to GitLab to actually building the feature, there's all these constraints. And so, for example, cycle time is easier to define because you can have clearly defined when you start working on a feature. You can say the milestone. So this is where, like, I don't know what the design is. And so this is where, again, I want to invite ideas. It could be the very first stage is not when you start counting the clock, is the moment that a person on the team drags it to the second stage. That's when you start the clock, and that's when you start counting the cycle time. So that's one way to do the counting. Another way is to integrate closely with sprints, or milestones as we call them, and say when this milestone begins, that's when the clock starts ticking for those issues, and you do the math there. So that's at least 2 ways to start counting the clock. And then once you get into the third stage and the fourth stage, it's relatively well defined how you count the clock there. So That's why I think cycle time, we should build it first, purely because it's just low risk, easy to define, and it still has value. It has less value than customer time, but because it's not as correlated to direct business benefit, but you can argue it has amazing benefits to operational excellence, is like the term that I've been throwing around. Because as an engineering manager, maybe you don't, like you're Eric Johnson at GitLab, maybe you care less about customer, you care about customer feedback, I'm sure he does, but maybe he's like hyper uber focused on just engineering, doing an amazing job of getting, features shipped. And so he cares about cycle time a lot. And so if he can improve that and make that awesome, that is great for his organization as a stakeholder. And for his company, GitLab, it's also amazing, right? Because you're shipping features faster. So, and as John, made a point, cycle time is also a big piece of the end-to-end thing. So that's why I think focusing on cycle time is well-defined, as clear benefits to the, the engineering stakeholders at least. But let's not lose our sight on the bigger goal, which is connecting the customer as we design this MVC, right? I'm not saying build it with the MVC, but let's keep our eyes on the goal. And so you can probably already know why it's confusing, or I don't have a solution to defining the end-to-end, including the customer. It's pretty obvious, because a customer creates an issue, and then we say like, oh, that issue that's not a good idea. We're not going to build it. So we close it. So what's the time there? Is it like 2 seconds? Is it 2 hours? We have an issue. It's moved. It's closed. It's reopened. It's promoted to an epic. Like, what happens to all those issues? Like, how do we measure time there? What is the inherent metric that we're trying to quantify? Are we trying to say that a customer gave us an issue? I'm thinking of the example of GitLab, and we responded to them really quickly. Do we care about that as an organization, as GitLab? I actually don't care about that too much, that the fact that I'm responding to people or the fact that Mark Fletcher was able to ping me really quickly and we were able to respond to them. That's important, but I think that's secondary to GitLab as a company. Like, our priorities are really about shipping code really quickly and triaging the plethora of issues from a customer. That's less important given our deluge of issues. Or maybe do we put a priority, a premium to customers, and so do we look at account, we have those account projects, and do we look at those issues particular? So there's so much variety of ideas we can implement in the product. And then that's just for GitLab. And like another company that is like fully like closed and they're not doing open source, and every single feature that they create is from like a stakeholder, and it makes sense, and maybe it's gone through requirements management. So that's much easier to build, because those issues, probably every single issue in that case, or like 99% of them, will eventually be implemented, and none of them will be closed because it didn't make sense. So how you define that, to me, is a really, really hard problem to solve. So that's why I just don't want to solve it at the beginning. I just want to focus on cycle time. So that I try to articulate all that in here. So questions, thoughts, comments on any of that? So that's all I have to say. So again, the next steps are, I don't think Annabelle's on the call, but I already pinged her, and she'll watch this video. I'm sure I can ask her to do so. And then so we'll just, these are my designs. So I've taken a stab at it, and then so Annabelle's going to make it more awesome. But to me, I'm actually not that concerned about the visual design, right? Because to me, like, making sure that these are well considered in the MVC, not as part of the MVC, but well considered how they impact future iterations, I think will be super crucial. So I, again, invite everybody to think more and participate more as we get to it. All right. I will see.
Victor, I have one question before we go. So regarding the manual order that we mentioned during this call, I couldn't find any issue to have that reflected in issue boards. Has that been discussed anywhere?
So there's an issue to create an issue board. So if you, okay.
The manual order.
So yeah, so for example, in this particular MVC, so thanks for asking that. Like, so what exactly are we building as an MVC? So we're definitely not going to build an issue board or a new issue board type, right? So that's definitely out of the picture. I think we need to probably build the configuration to this and maybe a way to surface the fact that your issue is moving between states, right? So like,
sorry, Victor. Let me just. I'm not talking about the custom workflows. I'm talking about the manual ordering of the backlog that we mentioned earlier.
oh, okay, sorry, it's a totally different topic.
That's why I stopped you there. Sorry.
Yeah, no, please interrupt. What was the question? Like, what
So
is
the question is, I saw the Epic for manual ordering of issue lists, backlog grooming, and right now it only has one issue there. Maybe I can share the screen. Maybe it's easier.
Yeah, I think yeah, the design is well there, and I think there's only one issue, but
there's only one issue here. My question is, this would be because right now on Create we're kind of struggling with ordering of issues, and we kind of love boards, but there is no way to like strict the ordering to not having accidental reordering, basically. So this manual ordering would be very beneficial for boards as well. I just want to make sure that this hasn't been discussed before going ahead and creating an issue. Because I only see one issue here on the Epic. So this is
right.
The Epic.
So if you look at the issue, all the design is there. It's well defined. It's UX ready. It's scope for 11.9. Doesn't look like we'll get to it. So then we're working on 11.10. I will not do what I've done like maybe like a year ago, which if it wasn't done, I would throw it further out. What I want to do right now is to barring any crazy like P1s, just work through that backlog, and so it will move to 11.10, and we'll work on it.
Okay.
Even higher than say what we just discussed for that past half hour in priority.
Okay. But nothing regarding boards yet.
Correct. So this feature is for a list view. So sorry, maybe I was missing. How does this relate to boards? Or do you have a feature request related to boards in regards to this?
Yeah, because I can see this as a very I can see this as a way to imbue a manual ordering in issue lists, and I can see this also being beneficial on boards. So as I can see, there's nothing being discussed. So I'll just go ahead and create an issue and ping you.
Right. No, so because it is, please create an issue if what I'm saying is incorrect, or missing. But this is the same ordering. What we're proposing in this issue is that any ordering inside an issue board between any two issues A and B, that same ordering right now is shared in any issue board inside your GitLab instance, and it's shared inside any Epic of attached issues. So that ordering is consistent. It's the same ordering in the database. And then this manual ordering, it will also use that same ordering.
Okay.
So that's the intentional design, and then there's a lot of talk about why that. I argue at least that's intentional design. And
okay, I'll have a read at this proposal and see if there's any gaps there and contribute comments there. Thanks.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for asking. Yeah, I'm super excited about that feature. I want that feature as well. So.
All right. Thank you.
All right. So I will see everybody next time we talk. Bye now.